research on some stuff that we discovered last week in the Sinnoh region. Very interesting, but it's a chat for another day. Ready for class, yeah? Alright, perfect. So, today we're learning about the fire-type Pokemon, Litten. Here he is. He's known as the Fire Cat Pokemon. Now, before we begin, I have to let you know that this is not actually my Litten. This is my friend's Litten, who recently hatched from an egg, which is why it's so small, it's just a baby. Now, usually, Littens tend to be right around 40 centimeters, or 1 foot and 4 inches tall, which is around double its size. So, this one still has a lot of room to grow before it reaches its full size. Now, Litten is known as the Fire Cat Pokemon. Any guesses why? Well, as you can probably see, it's a cat, and it's a fire type. Not much more than that. Now, its main features are its fur, which is primarily black, with some red stripes on its legs and on its face. Some red stripes on its legs and on its face. A really cool fact, actually, about the stripes on his face is that combined with its really big and yellow eyes that are shaped in a circle, it kind of takes shape to look like one of the alchemical symbols for sulfur, which is a highly flammable element. I'll put one right here for you to see. So yeah, as you can see, this here is the alchemical sign for brimstone, which is basically an older name for silver, right? You'll have to ask your science professor if you want to know more about this, but all you have to know for now is that it's very flammable, which matches Litten's fire-type theme. As you can see, the stripes on its head and the circle for the eyes. The circle for the eyes. I just thought it would be a little fun fact to know the meaning behind the stripes on its head, Anyways, let's move on to its other features. As you may have noticed, Litten has some red whiskers, 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 whiskers. And they're also very furry, and they come out of each cheek. It has a very, very small mouth and a very small black little nose. Boop. Now, it has black pointy ears, with the inside of the ears being white, and in between the ears it has two sort of spiky, furry hairs. They're not spiky, they're just furry. Now, lastly, we have its tail over here, right? Its tail, its tail, its tail. It's also very, very furry, and as you can see, it has this sort of tuft at the end of its tail as well, which is again very furry. Now, as you may have noticed or heard from me saying, Litten has a lot of fur, right? Litten uses this fur actually. So the way it does this is that Litten spends most of its time, licking and grooming its own fur. And then all this fur that it keeps licking and licking and licking and grooming and grooming and grooming gets collected inside of his stomach. And Litten can then light it up on fire, actually, and use it to attack by spitting it as fireballs. So it licks it at all its extra fur, and then it goes inside its belly, and there it heats up. It essentially burns it and spits it out as fireballs to attack. And what's really interesting is that these fireballs can actually change based on how it coughs. I thought it was a really interesting fact. What do you think? You see, it's also because Litten's fur produces flammable oils, right? Which allows it to burn like that and be able to use it as an attack. Again, I thought that was pretty cool. Now, Litten's fur coat actually regrows around twice a year, and when it begins to shed, Littens will actually burn their fur, which is essentially setting themselves on fire to burn away the old fur. Now, this is perfectly safe, perfectly normal. It does not actually harm the Litten, so don't worry about that, okay? one hasn't even done it yet because he's so young, he hasn't even had the need to shed his own fur yet. Now, Littens are usually quite solitary Pokemon, and they will typically keep to themselves, and they won't really show any emotions very easily. For example, trying to pet one if it does not trust you will usually result in you getting scratched, And even if it does trust you, they don't want too much affection. And this is why it's better from time to time to just leave the Litten alone for a bit. Don't want to stretch it out. Don't want it to scratch us. Don't want it to do anything like that, By the way, my finger, as you can see, is hurt. But it's not because this Litten scratched me, okay? This one does trust me, and it has not scratched me just yet. Anyways, let's move on. So, as you probably expect, Litten learns a variety of your low power fire type and normal type moves such as Ember, Growl, Furry Swipes, very generic. Very strong Littens are even able to learn moves such as Fire Fang, however, which is really nice for a cat who is fire type, But they can also learn a bunch of other moves that are not fire or normal type, such as Bite, which is a dark type move, Lick, which is a ghost type move, and even the fighting type move Double Kick, which is really useful for it as well. There are a bunch of moves that it can also learn via TM, but I think we will get to those once we look at its further evolutions, okay? Now, speaking of its evolutions, I think it's time we look at the first one. So, are there any questions before we look at the first evolution of Litten? Oh, good question. So I was going to mention it later, but I guess we can say it now too. So Littens have two different abilities. Those being Blaze and Intimidate. And all of the evolutions of Litten only get these two abilities as well. Blaze and Intimidate. So we can briefly talk about them now as well. Now, Blaze is the most common ability that it gets, right? And it basically increases Litten's fire type moves when Litten is in a pinch. So that means that if Litten is close to fainting, its fire type moves will do about 50% more damage, right? And this only applies to the fire type moves. So for example, Ember will get this boost, but Scratch will not. Now, the second ability it gets is Intimidate. What Intimidate does is lower the physical attack of the enemy Pokemon when Litten enters the battle. It's pretty simple, but it's actually pretty strong. Which essentially it makes the opponent do less damage just by you being there, by your presence, And it could be the difference between your Pokemon taking a hit and surviving, or fainting. Anyways, I'm gonna leave you here for a bit, Litten. So, any more questions that you have? Oh, about my finger. No, nothing happened. It's okay. Let's move on. Okay, let's move on. Any more questions? Yes, you are correct as well. So, very observant, very knowledgeable of you. So, Litten, yes, you're right. It's generally the first partner Pokemon that trainers starting in the Alola region will get. The other two being Rowlet and Poplio. And I think, if that's all the questions we have for now, let's move on to Litten's first evolution, which is called Torracat. Here he is. Now, Torracat is still just a fire-type Pokemon, and it is still the Fire Cat Pokemon. However, Torracats get a lot bigger than Litten, usually being about 70 centimeters tall, which is about 2 feet and 4 inches tall. Oh, Litten, he's still learning to walk, he's got to keep his balance. Now, Torracat, a lot bigger. A lot of its features get bigger as well, including its tail, whiskers, legs, ear, and basically everything, right? Now, the fur on the upper part of its body is mainly black. Litten. I have to make sure it doesn't fall. You can stay here for a bit. And the bottom part is mainly red. Now, its forelegs are more developed than its back or hind legs, and is even capable of bending iron with a single blow. Pretty cool. Now, the main thing you may know notice is that is this yellow sort of bell, yellow orangish bell that is on Torracat's neck, kind of like here. This is a fiery organ called a flame sac. Flame sac. Flame sac. Flame sac. You can lay down a bit, that's fine. Flame sac. Now, this is a very important part of Torracat. Torracat uses this flame sac to produce flames in order to attack or do whatever it needs to do with its flames, to be honest. This spell actually responds to Torracat's emotions. This means that if Torracat is in high spirits, the flame will get hotter and it can actually shine really brightly or even ring, like a bell normally rings when Torracat uses fire type attacks. This spell actually has a lot of interesting properties and is a very important part of Torracat. For example, it can actually absorb flames from outside sources and use them against the opponent. It's kind of like a built-in flash fire ability, boosting Torracat's fire type attacks. Now this spell is also used as a sensor, allowing Torracat to navigate in the darkness and maybe even see enemies if they are hiding in a battle or anything like that, yeah. And it's also an indicator of Torracat's well-being. So if it's shining brightly, usually it's a healthy and nice Torracat. If it's a bit, lacking a bit of light, we might need to see what's going on. Maybe it's a bit weak, maybe it needs medical attention. So that's a very good way to know if your Torracat is healthy or not. Now, Torracats are Pokemon which generally enjoy battling. However, they also tend to be more affectionate than in their pre-evolved form, it finally kind of gets a bit more affectionate. However, you still have to be very careful because they still have very, very sharp claws, so they might leave you with some small injuries if you try to pet it too much. Yes. Like this one. This injury right here. But it was not from Litten, so it's okay. So let's move on, okay? Let's move on. No, don't talk about this, let's move on. So, Torracat learns new moves, such as Flamethrower, and a bunch of variety of other moves which we will look at again with the last evolution. So, speaking of the final evolution, should we move on to it? Do you have any more questions related to Litten or Torracat? Not my finger. Come on, my finger is not Torracat. You really want me to tell you? Okay, well, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to tell too, because it was a really cool story, but it was about my research in the Sinnoh region last week. Fine, I'll tell you, okay? Torracat, you're gonna, Litten, you're gonna sit here for a little bit, okay? Perfect. So, as I said last week, me and some professors went to the Sinnoh region, specifically to, we went on a work trip, specifically to Eterna City, right? The work trip was great, everything was fine, but we heard that there was a building in Eterna Forest called the Old Chateau, pardon my French. It turns out that there was a bunch of strange things happening there recently, and we suspected it would have something to do with, ghost type Pokemon, as they usually do. So, us being researchers after all, we love these kinds of things. So we're like, we have to go have a look, right? Anyways, we go to the chateau, start looking around for anything that would help us find out what's happening, what's going on. We saw Gastlies and Mischievous. Again, nothing too out of the ordinary when it comes to like these old abandoned sort of houses. But then we entered this one room, and I could not get rid of the feeling that someone or something was watching us. And that's when I saw that the TV in the room was flickering and making static noises, right? So then I went to check it out. I got closer and closer, and I decided to click on the TV button to turn it off, right? And that's when it happened. I felt a sudden surge of electricity just going up my whole arm, and suddenly a Rotom bursts out of the screen, flying around the room like crazy, with a static laughter and mischievous eyes. Then suddenly, all the lights went off, safe to say, we ran out of there as fast as we could. We went to check my injury at the Pokemon Center and shared our findings with the local professors. So, yeah, turns out my pinky took most of the damage because for some reason the button that I used to press the TP was the pinky. Not sure why, but it's fine. Overall, I'm fine. It was just a little shock, and unfortunately, this took the biggest part of the shock. Anyways, class, I'll tell you more stories about other trips that I've done another time, okay? I think it's important today that we finish today's class and we look at Litten's final evolution, okay? So, Litten's final evolution is the Heal Pokemon, Incineroar. Now, Incineroar gains the Dark type, making it a Dark and Fire type Pokemon. Fun fact, it's the only Dark and Fire type Pokemon discovered to date, except for the Houndour line, so Houndour and Houndoom. Now, I think before we even look at its biology, we have to talk about something. Incineroar is the Heal Pokemon. What does that even mean? What is a heal? Now, a heel is typically a professional wrestler who portrays the villain or the bad guy of a story. It's basically like the anti-hero to the story, right? Which matches Incineroar in his personality relatively well. Now let's quickly look at its biology, okay? Incineroar finally stands on two legs, and it grows to be 1.8 meters tall, or just under 6 foot, and it also gains more muscle. Apart from that, it does maintain a lot of the general features that it had on its face. The main features now are on its chest, which has become grey, and the flames around its waist, resembling a wrestling belt. Now, this belt is produced within Incineroar's body, and as fire-type Pokemon use their fire-type attacks, such as flamethrower and stuff, from their mouth, Incineroar actually can have these flames coming out of its center of its belt. So instead of attacking with its mouth, it can actually attack from the belt that would be around its waist, which I think is pretty interesting and pretty unpredictable, Not to say that that is the only way that Incineroar can attack, because Incineroar actually really likes to get in close in battle and use its powerful limbs to deal damage. Now, they are expert in battling without holding back, to the point that if they are not trained properly, they will actually not care if there's passerbys or other Pokemon that are not in the fight, and they might accidentally hit someone who was just watching the battle, or the ref, or the other trainer by accident, However, they usually take pride in fighting opponents who are strong. In fact, if they are fighting an opponent which they deem is, too weak for them, or unworthy to fight them because it's either too weak or too injured, Incineroar will actually lose motivation to fight, or it might even get bored, which is, it's a great thing to have, but it's also not great if you're trying to win a battle and your Pokemon just kind of gives up, even though it could win easily. So, Incineroars, however, they will usually attack first in a battle, and they actually get relatively violent and aggressive, and sometimes might even ignore its trainer's orders if it doesn't respect it enough, because Incineroars tend to have a very big ego. Or sometimes they might just not be in the mood to listen to someone who they don't 100% respect, That's why it's important to train them from young and to make sure that, they respect you, they have a good connection with you. Very important, because otherwise you can end up with a Pokemon that has a lot of ego and does not listen to you. So, it's very important to raise them well from when they're small so that these issues don't happen. And also because you want to have a good friend, right? You want to have someone that you can trust and you can connect with. Now, because it likes to play the villain, however, hence heal Pokemon, Incineroars do seem to get very into the paper of being a bit like villainous and stuff. But they do seem to really enjoy it when they make young Pokemon or children happy and kind of admire them, because it makes them feel like they're playing their role of being this anti-villain properly. And I think deep down they have a soft heart, and they kind of, they want want to be admired and they want to be seen, even if it's as this like villainous role. It's kind of like it likes to act as a villain, but deep down it's like a supportive Pokemon, you know, and it cares for the other Pokemon and other people. Now, let's move on to its moves, okay? Incineroar learns a bunch of strong fire and dark type moves, such as Throat Chop and Flare Blades, for example, as well as other moves that are, for example, fighting type moves or normal type moves, such as Cross Chop, Thrash, and can learn actually a variety of moves via TM, such as Crunch and Fire Blast, as well as moves from a lot of different types, such as, and there's a long list here, so get ready. It can learn Bug type moves, such as U-Turn and Leech Life, Steel type moves, such as Iron Head, Flying type moves like Acrobatics, Shadow Claw, which is a Ghost type move, Thunder Punch, which is an Electric type move, Earthquake, which is a Ground type move, and even Outrage, which is a Dragon type move. Just to name a few. That's so many types, and I think it's really cool because it adds kind of to this like antagonistic persona of a Pokemon that it kind of uses moves that it might not seem like it's able to learn at all, you know. Now, finally, we have to look at its signature move, and I say signature move in a bit of brackets because some other Pokemon can actually learn it by a TM too, but Incineroar is the only Pokemon that can naturally learn this move, and it actually learns it upon evolving. And this move is called Dark Lariat. Now, this is a very powerful dark type move in which Incineroar kind of spreads its arms and spins, you know, I'm not gonna spin, but kind of spins, and swings both of its arms to hit the target. Now this move ignores any defense or evasion stat changes that the opponent might have undergone. So if the opponent has increased their defense a lot, doesn't matter, Dark Lariat will do just as much damage. And last of all, Incineroar's Dark Lariat, right, can actually evolve. So if Incineroar holds the Z crystal, Inzenium Z or Inzenium Z, and its trainer obviously has to be holding a Z ring or Z ring, Darkest Lariat can actually be upgraded once per battle, of course, once per battle, to the Z move Malicious Moonsault. Malicious Moonsault. Malicious Moonsault, which is a way stronger version of Darkest Lariat. Very, very strong move, but obviously Z moves, you can only use them once per battle, right? Because of the amount of energy that they use. And I believe that pretty much covers everything about the Litten line, and just in time as well, since, you know, we're right out of time and it's time for the class to end. So, thank you once again so much for coming to class. Like always, let me know what you'd like to see next. And I'll see you next class, okay? Bye bye.